This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
That same year, at the age of 7, I first attended a show at the Tiffany when my mother, Connie, and my stepfather, Kurt, took me to see a double feature. John G. Alvidson's Joe and Carl Reiner's Where's Papa? Wait a minute. You saw a double feature of Joe and Where's Papa at 7? You bet I did. And while that was a memorable screening, hence I'm writing about it now, for me at the time, it was hardly culture shock. If we go by author Mark Harris's timeline, the beginning of the New Hollywood Revolution was 1967. Then my first years of going to see movies at the theater, I was born in 63, coincided with the beginning of the Revolution, 67. The Cinematic Revolutionary War, 68 through 69, and the year the Revolutionary War was won, 1970, which was the year New Hollywood became the Hollywood. Alvidson's Joe made quite a splash when it was released in 1970. It was an undeniable influence on Taxi Driver. Unfortunately, in the last 50 years, this powder keg of a picture has kind of faded away. The film tells the story of a distraught upper-middle-class father, played by Dennis Patrick, who loses his daughter, Susan Sarandon, in her motion picture debut, to the hippie drug culture of the era. While visiting the disgusting pad his daughter shares with her scumbag junkie boyfriend, Patrick ends up bashing his head in. She's not there at the time. While sitting in a tavern, trying to come to grips with both the violence and the crime he committed, he meets a racist, loudmouth, blue-collar, hard-hat worker named Joe, played in a star-making performance by Peter Boyle. Joe is sitting at the bar, drinking his beer after work, carrying on a profanity-filled America, love it or leave it rant about hippies, black folks, and society circa 1970 in general. Nobody in the working-class tavern is paying attention to him. The bartender even tells him, obviously not for the first time, Joe, give us all a break. Joe's diatribe ends with the sentiment that somebody ought to kill them all. The hippies. Well, Patrick just did. And in an unguarded moment, makes a barroom confession that only Joe hears. What follows is the strangely antagonistic, yet symbiotic relationship between the two different men from two different classes. They're not exactly friends. Joe's practically blackmailing the anguished father. But in a black comic twisted way, they do become compadres. The distinguished middle-class man of the executive class has enacted the fascistic rants of this low-class, blue-collar, loudmouth slob. By blackmailing Patrick into sort of an alliance, Joe shares both the murderer's dark secret and, to some degree, the culpability of the murder. This dynamic unleashes the desires and inhibitions of the blue-collar blowhard and buries the cultured man's guilt, replacing it with a sense of purpose and righteousness. So the two men, armed with automatic rifles, are executing hippies at a commune. And in a tragic, ironic freeze frame, the father ends up executing his own daughter. Pretty strong stuff? You bet. But what that synopsis can't begin to convey is how fucking funny the film is. As harsh and ugly and violent as the movie Joe is, at its heart, it's a kettle black comedy about class in America, bordering on satire, while also being savagely vicious. Blue-collar, upper-middle class, and youth cultures are represented by their worst surrogates. Every male character in the film is a loathsome cretin. Today, it might be controversial to even refer to Joe as a black comedy, but it sure wasn't when it was first released. At the time I saw Joe, it was easily the ugliest movie I'd seen, a spotted hill till I saw The Last House on the Left. Frankly, it was the squalor of the apartment the two junkies at the beginning lived in that creeped me out the most. In fact, it made me a little sick to my stomach. Even the rendering of the junkies' apartment in the Mad Magazine spoof made me a little ill. And the audience at the Tiffany Theater in 1970 watched the early section of the film in silence. But once Dennis Patrick enters the tavern and Peter Boyle's Joe enters the movie, the audience started laughing. And in no time at all, the adult audience went from repulsed repose to outright hilarity. I remember they laughed pretty much every fucking thing Joe said. It was a superior laugh. They were laughing at Joe, but they were laughing with Peter Boyle, who enters the movie like a force of nature. And the talented screenwriter, Norman Wexler, gives him a bunch of outrageous lines. Boyle's comedic performance alleviates the picture's one-note ugliness. It doesn't make Joe likable, but it does make him sort of enjoyable. Alvidson, by combining Peter Boyle's bravura comic performance with this grim trashologue, produces a cocktail mixed with piss that's disturbingly tasty. Joe saying fucked up shit is a crack-up. Like with Freebie and the Bean a few years later, Audiences might feel guilty for laughing, but I'm here to tell you, laugh they did. Even 7-year-old little me laughed. Not because I understood what Joe was saying.